There's another fire at an oil depot in Russia. Moscow is taking urgent measures, Lavrov is leaving the Russian Federation for an unexpected destination, and Donald Trump is asking, "Who is my friend Putin?" We'll discuss that and more right now. Valeriy Klochok, head of the Center for Public Analysis, Vesha. Congratulations, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Almost 100 drones targeted the Russian Federation, with their ministry reporting the downing of 83 drones over oil depots in Stavropol Territory and the city of Svetlograd. It was a mix of light from the fires and dark times due to the overall situation. Additionally, Ufa, located in the Republic of Bashkortostan, set the tone for the evening. In Bashkortostan, 3 drones attacked local fuel and energy companies, prompting military experts to note the importance of having the right defenses in place. Meanwhile, in Moscow, powerful protective nets are being installed, though their effectiveness is uncertain. In Canada, Foreign Minister Melanie Joly has suggested using long-range weapons, indicating a growing tendency to support strikes. However, NATO's reaction to authorizing strikes on Russian territory remains unclear, despite previous encouragement for Ukraine to develop its own missiles and drones. The focus should be on financing drone.
Я поки що не бачу якоїсь перспективи, те, що відреагує НАТО на дозволи нам бити по території Росії, хоча вони не заперечують цього. Давайте поточнемо. Ви можете бити. Сказали нам давно вже наші західні партнери, робіть свої ракети, дрони і бийте. Тобто тут завдання має стояти на
Production in Ukraine.
спроможні профінансувати виготовлення дронів в Україні або залучити коштів до такого процесу.
Today, Denmark is actively involved in the process of accumulating financial assets for Ukraine in order to really invest in arms production in Ukraine, and thus reduce Ukraine's dependence on Western arms supplies. This trend, friends, will continue. I share the indignation of Ukrainians and those who support us in general because we are being blocked from attacking Russia with the Western weapons we are given. But I still see that today it is not, and tomorrow it may be. Why is that? Because the threats that Europe is recording today, already publicly from Russia, North Korea, and China, are more than obvious. They are absolutely clear. Today, European countries are accumulating weapons to defend against potential attacks, a reality that once seemed unlikely. This preparation is particularly evident in Eastern and Northern Europe, as analysts, experts, and cautious politicians indicate that they are gearing up for possible emergencies.
Готується Східна Європа і взагалі Європейський Союз до можливих якихось надзвичайних ситуацій.
Yesterday, a report prepared by the former president of Finland and experts from the European Union was published. It was handed over to the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. The world is very big. There are more than 160 pages, which say that Europe should move from a policy of reaction to some threats to a policy of prevention, that is, to a policy of preparedness.
До політики їх попередження, тобто до політики готовності. Це абсолютно змінює парадигму саме Європи, тому коли
This shifts the paradigm in Europe. That's why I haven't heard any condemnation from our Western partners regarding strikes on Russian territory, including refineries. Canada, which has adopted a supportive stance, is likely to facilitate this, although its military and financial assistance is limited compared to other countries. Canada has signed security agreements and hosts many of our refugees. I cannot underestimate their role in helping Ukraine, but we understand that Canada is not a favorite in setting the military agenda in the world. This is the prerogative of the United States of America today as it has been in the past. So, of course, the United States, together with its allies, will determine what to do, how to do it. The visit of the South Korean defense minister yesterday is very indicative in this regard, where he was actually so important in the United States. In the United States, they gave a joint briefing to Anthony Blinken and Lloyd Austin, and they talked about this very thing there, by the way. It said that South Korea would provide assistance to Ukraine, but only after they understand the scope of cooperation with North Korea, after they understand what North Korea has received in return. That is, this process will be slow, and of course, events are happening quite rapidly and dynamically.
Звісно, що події відбуваються доволі стрімко і динамічно, бо Північна Корея вже починає коментувати.
Because North Korea is already beginning to comment publicly that at that time, their leader instructed his subordinates to help Russia from the first day of the so-called SCPE. That is, we can already rely on this comment and understand that North Korea will not abandon its intention to help Russia further, as Kim Jong-un says in their holy war. And this war can indeed be unleashed against the entire West. The reluctance of our Western partners to transfer weapons to Ukraine seems aimed at delaying the significant escalation threatening the Korean Peninsula, Europe, and the Baltic states. Putin's intentions to attack Narva have been publicly stated for some time. Thus, the issue of whether to strike or seek permission is not as straightforward as it may seem.
Тому тут, друзі, знаєте, такі дуже лінійні площині питання бити, не бити, дозвіл, не дозвіл не лежить. Тут питання.
The question is how many weapons they are willing to give us. And of course, only then can we talk about permits. But of course, the viewer can rightly ask the question, why can't we be what we are? Once again, I will try to emphasize that this is my personal opinion. This is how the West is trying to regulate complex processes today, which are already unexpected, not inevitable, and still hopes to delay and win some time for itself in order to prepare more decisively and more effectively for realistic threats. And Ukraine today is a very successful deterrent for the West, for politics and the geopolitical context, against a possible, or rather not possible, but obvious military annexation, a military threat not only from Russia, but also from North Korea. We also have to take China into account here. And despite the fact that China is now showing that it is not ready for a full-fledged major conventional war, the situation can change at any time. Moreover, China has made a statement today that it does not see anything outrageous or extraordinary, incomprehensible or otherwise in North Korea's cooperation with Russia. It doesn't even welcome it. It doesn't deny it. This means that if he denies it, it means that he supports it. We will continue to follow the events, so the main task now is to maximize the production of our own weapons. Choi Song-hee, head of the DPRK's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, raises questions about the need for such institutions in a dictatorial regime. However, they likely exist in name only. She met with Lavrov to emphasize that the DPRK has been allied with the Russian Federation since its inception and will remain so indefinitely. Even death may not separate them, though efforts will be made to change that. I mention this because you accurately noted the meeting attended by Anthony Blinken, Lloyd Austin, and the South Korean foreign minister. They all met. They all said that the threat is greater than ever. In fact, Anthony Blinken says that it is a sign of weakness that Putin is reaching out to the DPRK. Although I would certainly not see it that way, we have had many experts here discuss why he's doing this. But nevertheless, we did not see any determination. The Financial Times, although the conference was large and there were a lot of participants, writes that this is not the case in South Korea right now. That there is already a correlation, a dispute about whether to give us lethal weapons, and that there is something more between the government and the opposition, that they are arguing. Don't they understand that the debate shouldn't focus on providing weapons, as South Korea has never done this, but rather on fighting an existential enemy? This problematic neighbor claims eternal allegiance to Russia, and soon may to Iran as well. What is the point of such arguments? Will discussions and articulation truly help us? We need to rely on South Korea now, not the United States, despite its alliance with South Korea. We have to rely on ourselves, first of all, and we have to get used to it, friends. At first glance, South Korea is twice the size of North Korea and has more advanced technology and military equipment. However, Russia's war against Ukraine demonstrates that success on the battlefield depends not only on technology, but also on the quantity of conventional weapons. From South Korea, we can obtain 3 to 5 million shells of 100-something millimeters and 155 millimeters caliber, including older Soviet-style shells. However, South Korea has very few Soviet armored vehicles to offer, and what they could provide isn't modern equipment. When comparing military capabilities, we are focusing solely on the South and the North, as the two sides that will engage in combat. And now, it seems that South Korea will simply grind North Korea to a halt in one day. Added to this is the story that South Korea is supported by the United States. Yes, this is true, and Lloyd Austin did say that in the event of a provocation against South Korea, the Americans will defend South Korea by all means, including nuclear weapons. Because North Korea has nuclear weapons, this is their official statement, and this information has been confirmed. How many? What range? It's not so important now because Seoul is only 30 kilometers from the 38th parallel, so it's not that far, so anything can fly there. But I'll just remind you of the 1950s, when more than 1 million soldiers took part in the war on the side of North Korea, including those from South Korea. South Korea, even at one point, was invaded by North Korea, and then the Americans helped to repel it. Americans understand that the scale of the war on the Korean Peninsula, in my estimation, will be no less than in Ukraine. Ukraine has a very stretched front line. The front line has been significantly lengthened, but the number of troops to be involved in the operation is limited today. They calculate the number of shells needed based on Russia firing several thousand shells at Ukraine daily. If the war continues as long as the conflict between South and North Korea, millions of shells will be required. Thus, the opposition's position makes sense. They prioritize their own defense. The Poles, for example, have transferred many weapons, but are focused on fortifying their 400-kilometer border with Russia and Belarus. They plan to complete this project by 2028, implementing minefields, anti-tank weapons, and other defenses along the border, similar to what we did with Belarus. This is because they anticipate threats from both Belarus and the Kaliningrad region. The situation in South Korea is comparable. Claiming there's no threat from North Korea is incorrect. There's a key principle. To prevent war, one must prepare for it. Austin's announcement about moving strategic deterrence and defense assets to South Korea indicates that serious long-range missiles, not just small arms, will be deployed. They perceive a threat from potential assistance to North Korea if a war breaks out and Russia becomes involved. While this situation may benefit us, it poses challenges for the U.S., as they would need to send troops and are directly involved with nuclear weapons. Today's cooperation between the United States and East Asian countries, Japan, Australia, the Philippines, and South Korea, is a completely different level, and it is not possible to just sit back or remain silent. Therefore, I do not exclude that certain processes, including in the United States, are not what they were ordered to do, and so it will be, but they are advised to do it anyway. That is, we must realize that the world is really facing great threats. I say this for a sober assessment of the situation. And in Ukraine today, of course, at first glance, it may seem that the situation is very bad, because no one is giving anything. But I remind you that Denmark is already forming a fund in Ukraine.
Ситуація, взагалі все пропало, бо ніхто нічого не дає. Але я нагадую, що в Україні, ще раз того, що я почав, Данія сформувала
is designed to raise funds.
Фонд, який передбачений для залучення коштів.
Ukraine will receive a military aid package, and Europeans recognize the need for funding. He states that weapons should be manufactured in Ukraine. But South Korea expresses reservations, uncertain if North Korea will launch a military attack against them. If North Korea's intentions change, and after training some troops to use drones and build new fortifications, it could pose a threat. South Korean intelligence reports, supported by Blinken's recent briefing, indicate that North Korean troops are training in Russia on drones and air defense systems. These are technologies South Korea has never used before, indicating that the conflict's history will be very different. Countries are interested in this war due to various economic issues, such as the evident recession in China, which is seeking financial solutions. Additionally, the Middle East situation regarding oil may pose challenges if prices begin to fall. They may say that everything is fine, but at some point they may, I won't say that they support Iran, because that's a completely different story. The Saudis and Sunni Muslims are not Shiites for sure. But let's remember October 7th, when Israel launched an attack on Hamas. At the time, everyone was confused. It was a serious threat.
Жовтень місяць, 7 жовтня, коли Ізраїль розпочав атаку на Хамас, тоді всі були збентежені.
Joseph Biden and America have managed to streamline this situation, to keep the escalation under control so that it does not go far beyond. But Israel understands that the nature of war is different. The Korean Peninsula, I believe, is a serious challenge for the United States today. That is why we hear such statements. This may upset us, but we must consider it. If we can't acquire weapons from them, we should seek funding to buy technologies instead and produce weapons in Ukraine. Currently, one Ratal factory is operational in Ukraine, with 4 more expected next year, prompting a nervous reaction from the Kremlin.
4 заводи Рейнметал в Україні вже фактично, один точно є, 4 будуть готові наступного року, і в Кремлі на це дуже нервово відреагували, бо вони ж розуміють, що тепер Україна може стати самодостатньою.
They realize that Ukraine can become largely self-sufficient in deterring Russian aggression, preventing further advances despite Russia's current progress on the battlefield. We shouldn't view the issue of why we aren't receiving support as linear. It's a complex, multifaceted problem. More than 100 people are watching us right now on this Friday, November 1st, the 3rd month of autumn. Iryna Uzlova, joined by Valeriy Klochok, head of the Center for Public Analysis, Vesha. We are moving on, as Donald Trump has responded to accusations of being a close friend of Russian dictator Putin. His response was directed at Tucker Carlson, a controversial propagandist who interviewed Putin on February 8th of this year. Tucker was amazed when Putin spoke about the Ruriks during their interview, which allowed Putin to share his false narratives with Carlson's millions of viewers. Donald Trump has since echoed these narratives, stating that those who call him a friend of Russia or a Russian spy are sick. Trump also pointed out that he blocked the construction of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. I destroyed it. No one could do it but me. Hillary Clinton accused him of Russian ties in 2016. Democrats used this to win. What do you see in this statement? Is Trump disowning Putin or not? Or is it just nothing more than an investment in election battles? It is difficult to understand Trump, because if you look at his program materials that he has voiced regarding his future policy, it is clearly a policy of continuing his presidency when he was the 45th president, and he sees that he can continue it now. As for the sanctions policy, yes, he imposed sanctions. For the sake of truth, he stopped, but suspended construction, it was frozen for a while, then resumed. But I'm just reminding you that Europe's dependence on Russian gas under Trump has only grown. So somewhere the policy was a little bit ineffective, but that's how it was marked. Trump is now promising to lift sanctions against Russia and move away from the sanctions policy, instead imposing heavy duties. This would significantly impact China's trade with the U.S., which remains a substantial market with a mutual trade turnover of about $400 billion. Thus, there is much to discuss regarding Trump's policy and vision. I recognize these are non-standard approaches, differing from past methods, but global realities are changing. It's uncertain if Trump is prepared to accept and consider these changes if he becomes president again. The fact that he says that Russia is not his friends, we must know and understand one more thing. The United States has developed a foreign policy doctrine that is supported by both Republicans and Democrats, that is unshakable under any president, Democrat, Republican, Democrat again, Republican again. They change, but the foreign policy remains the same. It remains the same. We only see manifestations of fringe forms that differ, for example, in what distinguishes Trump from Obama. But let me remind you that under Obama, Osama bin Laden was physically destroyed, and Trump destroyed Soleimani. How do these two presidents differ regarding Ukraine? Many condemn Obama for compelling us to surrender Crimea. However, Trump did not ensure the return of Crimea. He could have provided us with weapons to help us reclaim it, especially as construction began. We tend to exaggerate the merits of some and downplay others when aligning with a candidate. Remember, the elections are in America, and the U.S. president is elected based on American interests, not Ukraine's.
І Трамп, і будь-хто, будь-який президент, чи Хіларі Клінтон однозначно буде дивитися на світ через призму інтересів Сполучених Штатів Америки.
In this sense, the statement by the Czech Prime Minister Peter Fiala was very good, as he said that I do not see any prospects for improving cooperation. The United States of America and Europe, no matter who wins. He is talking about improvement. Europe needs to become more autonomous in security matters. This poses a significant problem for Europe. A discussion is already underway, highlighted by a major report recently published by the European Union, which is available on their website.
Урсулі фон дер Ляєн, і він став публічним, його опублікували, є на сайті Європейського Союзу.
This indicates a discussion in Europe about its future, including Ukraine, which, while not yet an EU member, is part of Europe. I believe Europe needs to establish its own security alliance to deter Russian aggression, as neither Democrats nor Republicans act in the interests of other countries, focusing instead on their own national interests.
Республіканці не діють в інтересах там чиїхось країн, вони діють в інтересах своїх країн. Вони допомагають утримувати демократію, але кажуть 1, 2, 3.
Democrats say that you have to develop. They are so active in supporting South Korea. South Korea has demonstrated a knack for economic growth. South Korean cars, electronics, and military equipment are often superior to those in Europe. Why did Poland buy tanks from South Korea? Cooperation between South Korea and the U.S. has enabled South Korea to develop successfully despite corruption scandals and presidential prosecutions. North Korea might consider acquiring South Korean enterprises and technologies to exist as a unified entity. Regarding Trump's policy, while he recognizes Russia as an enemy, he seeks reconciliation at any cost to defend U.S. interests and gain voter support. However, he may realize that resources could become insufficient as East Asia is a U.S. priority.
Якою буде політика Трампа, чи він там вважатиме ворогом Росію, так вона й залишалась у нього ворогом. Просто він бачить вирішення цього питання по-іншому. Він хоче все примирити, зупинити, щоб воно стало і все. В який спосіб, якою ціною це відбудеться, Трамп абсолютно байдуже. Тому що він в такий спосіб відстоїть інтереси США. І виборець його буде за це вітати. Він отримає ще більше підтримки. Але тут же ж історія про те, що він розуміє, що ресурсів в певний момент може не вистачити, тому що східноазійський регіон...
South Korea will not be able to defend itself, but Europe can, so they are pushing Europe, and I divide it in this part on the principle of pay more for security. I share this position. In this particular respect, yes, but the way Trump is doing it, of course, is painful for many people. It's unpleasant. And if we are talking only about security issues, his other initiatives can only provoke additional conflicts. Because when he says that I will lift all oil bans, open up all oil storage facilities, wells, and so on, he will be asked the question, if you want to do this to stabilize some kind of world order, well, okay, it will work for a second. Our storage facilities will not be empty. These are the U.S. strategic stockpiles. So maybe we should solve these issues in a different way. And here I am, more than convinced that there will be another discussion. That's why what Trump said before the election is one thing, but what it will look like afterwards is quite another. Trump's approach suggests he will prioritize different interests than global security. Meanwhile, Sergei Lavrov, who engages with the DPRK and represents a terrorist state, is set to visit Malta for the first time since the full-scale invasion, attending a meeting of the OSCE Foreign Affairs Council.
Початку повномасштабного вторгнення поїде до Європи і відвідає Мальту, візьме участь в засіданні Ради міністрів закордонних справ ОБСЄ.
Why is he going there? Will he be arrested, or could his plane be shot down? What does Lavrov's visit to EU countries signify? Has the EU already explained this? Yes, indeed, the OSCE. Let's remember that this is an organization that includes Russia. I understand our dissatisfaction, but when yesterday we were discussing the track from Lukashenko's statement about that he was saying that the West was ready for a draw, and he insisted that I did not exclude that this information was sent to the West. That is, there were certain agreements with Lukashenko to do this. I'm just explaining what it is. The West needs time to launch defense and so on, and many people laughed at this and said that, no, this is all nonsense. Today, we find confirmation of my version that Europe is leaving open the possibility of communication with Russia, And the fact that Lavrov is actually invited to this meeting may look like they do not object. Diplomatically speaking, it will be like this. We do not object to maintain communication. Excuse me. But then we should be outraged when Lavrov flies to the UN in the same way. We are rightly outraged, but it is not up to us. Let's understand this situation. We influence these processes, but we do not fully determine them, because each country influences the processes in the world through the instruments of power, force, weapons, and so on, a strong economy, and the rest of the successful judicial and law enforcement system. We have problems with this, so we are often told, friends, let's move faster somehow so that we can be as subjective as possible. Therefore, communication is possible with Lavrov, which indicates to me that the version of possible negotiations between European countries and Russia on the Russian-Ukrainian war may take place. When this is brought into the public sphere, we demonstrate to Ukraine that we are ready for this. At this stage, you have to understand and adequately assess your own capabilities to deter Russian aggression. And this is a very unattractive story for us to understand. Beyond our dissatisfaction with Lavrov's visit to the OSCE, it's important to understand its purpose. While this meeting won't lead to an immediate resolution of the war in Ukraine or a return to peace, it will allow for an assessment of positions. Yesterday, at a meeting with Lukashenko in Minsk, Lavrov made another statement that was hardly noticeable. He highlighted the security guarantees Russia sought before the 2021 invasion, specifically regarding NATO's borders as of 1997, which would require countries like Bulgaria and Romania to leave NATO. This idea remains in Putin's mindset and is part of the broader agenda supported by China and North Korea. Russia and Putin, and including his supporters China and Kim Jong-un, the DPRK, because China also, in signing the final declaration of the meeting between Xi Jinping and the in 2022, in the winter, it was written there. If anyone read it on the Kremlin's website, I read it in detail then, and it struck me that they remain unchanged, unwavering allies. Although they are not allies, but partners, they are allies in the issue of not expanding military blocs to Eastern Europe. This is a fundamentally important issue for them, so they can put forward the maximum goal of returning to the 1997 borders. It's more accurate to reference 1999, as a cooperation agreement was signed with NATO in 1997, not a membership agreement. Ultimately, Ukraine might be pressured to sign a peace agreement with Russia, which could include a condition of not joining NATO. This possibility should not be overlooked, which is why Lavrov's visit to the OSCE is significant in light of the official EU position. Thank you, Valeriy, for your insights and analysis this week. We'll reconvene in the same format on Monday. Take care and good luck. I'm Iryna Uzlova, and if you want more analytics, please subscribe to the Klochok Time YouTube channel.
Іryna Uzlova звати мене, друзі. Хочете чути більше аналітики? Як ви зрозуміли, підписуйтесь, будь ласка, на YouTube Klochok Time, пана Валерія, там в колі аналітиків.
And subscribe to Channel 24's YouTube channel as well. Come back to us on Monday. We are very grateful to you for always being there. And together, we increase our audience and our knowledge. So, write your comments, put your likes, take care of yourself, believe in